Welcome to Morning
Vacant.
Minutes. We've got myself, Michael Berger, Mark Novak. Vacant, to be vacant or not to be vacant. Today, let's talk about the decision owners think about pros and cons when having their property vacant or not. You probably think to yourself, well, you don't want it vacant. But we sometimes think to ourselves that, and owners choose not to accept an offer that we have. And this morning we sort of want to brainstorm, talk through probably the pros and cons that's going through an owner's mind, especially in a market where it's tougher and you're not going to be renting it for what you were renting it for previously. You may be renting it for 5, 10, 20, up to 50% less than what you're previously getting in rent. And is that better? Is it better, Mark, to take 50% less or to keep it empty?
Some tips and tricks on landlords, the cool cats, what they do, how they manage their vacancies. Very, very interesting. But it's not quite what it seems. I do have to admit, when it comes to commercial and residential, the cool cats are generally winners more so, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And they're really adaptive to the market conditions, and they know where they are. Their fingers on the pulse. They know which, because Mark, if a commercial property can be empty for, let's face it, for 1 year, you're seeing a few different markets. If you think to just that residential market, in 1 year, there's been 15% swings up and down. So you've got to really have your finger on the pulse to know where you're at and weigh up those pros and cons. Do you want it empty for maybe another year or just get it rented?
They're pretty agile, these owners, you're right. Now, I reckon, and it depends on the style of property, and we'll cover residential in a second, but with commercial, the landlords are not only are they patient, but they're agile. So what they'll do is they'll look at alternate uses. They'll look at investing money in a dead zone. So they're potentially hurting, they're potentially even on their knees, and they'll still invest a little bit more money to get another use potentially working in the place, even if it's not guaranteed and it's a risk. So that's like sometimes partitioning the walls. The great thing with commercial properties, particularly freestanding, is you can chop them up and make them into smaller pieces.
Yeah. Hey, Julie. And that's what we see a lot where you're exactly right. They may pull down walls, put up walls, do a bit of a fit out to try and hone in on a specific use. And a lot of the time that's with no guarantee of a tenant working forward. Now, what would be when let's use an example of a shop. It was in Brookvale. It was rented for $50,000 a year for the last 10 years. It's come vacant. It's been empty for 6 months, and now there's an offer of $25,000 a year. What stops an owner taking that deal? I think a lot of it's in their head, but are there any repercussions, Mark? Maybe with loans, maybe with valuations, like. What's your view of
Well, some mortgagees now
couple things that may stop that owner taking that? Because yep.
Sorry, you cut out. Some mortgagees now insist that they actually approve applicants for properties. So particularly with retail leases, because there's such a long time. So it's quite interesting now. Your bank didn't really care once you took your mortgage out. They said good luck and we'll see you on the other end. Now the bank wants you to report the lease to them in some circumstances, approve the lease before it actually goes ahead. Very, very interesting. So maybe your bank won't approve it is number one. The value of the property being eroded, I guess that's also the bank's interest. How does that work, Mr. Burge?
Yeah, so a lot of the time, the value of a property will be on the income. So for example, if I've got 2 retail shops and one's rented for $50,000, and one's rented for 25,000, let's just say on a 5% yield, the 50,000 a year shop is worth 1 million, and the 25,000 income shop is worth 500,000. Identical shops, identical everything, and there's almost half the price difference. Now, if you bought a property with 50,000 income valued at $1 million, and let's say you borrowed $700,000 of it, which you can 30% deposit, and now you've rented it for 25,000. That asset on the same metrics is now worth $500,000, but your loan is 700,000. So now you've got the bank will look at it as a fairly risky deal. And sometimes they don't know what they can do it. This is probably the thing. They can then say, well, hang on, we want a 20% buffer or 30% buffer between what it's worth and your debt levels. Mr. and Mr. Vendor, you need to pay us $300,000 cash now because the property's not worth $1 million, it's worth 500, and we only want to have a debt level of 300,000 on it. So we need that cash now, or otherwise we're pulling the funding, which could lead to an owner selling. I think that's a very drastic example, but it is an example, and it's very reflective of the income that's there. So that can sometimes really put off owners doing a deal. Because Mark, I know a big saying, especially a lot with our Italian and Greek owners, their attitude is
School of Logonomics saying,
is some money is better than no money. So you've had it empty for 6 months. You've got a deal. It could be empty for another 6 or 12 or 18 months because you may be in the market, that 50 grand you're getting just may not be achievable. No matter how much you hope and pray and paint this and do that, tenants are just not going to pay that. So would you rather for at least a year or two get 25 grand a year or no money?
And also their holding costs are less. So a lot of landlords, when they bought these properties 15, 20, 10 years ago, interest rates were at 8, 9, 11%. So if they're currently got commercial rates sitting at 3, 4, 5%, maybe they're borrowing off residential to secure those types of low loans. But your actually cost of holding the asset is 1/3 of what it was 10 years ago. So yes, you're taking a hit on rent, but you're actually your holding cost is 33. That's assuming they haven't eroded any of the debt. So their 33% is their holding cost of what it was 10 or 15, 20 years ago. So to have a rent of half just to get through this environment sometimes isn't necessarily that bad, eh?
Yeah, it's a good point. So when I'm advising clients, it's like with that example, I do ask, I mean, you've got to have a really good relationship with your owners because I basically say, one, would you be looking to sell in the next, let's say the lease is 3 years, would you be looking to sell in the next 3 to 5 years? And if they say, and I'll go through some of the checkpoints which would lead them to take the deal. So are you looking to sell?
Half the rent could mean half the value of the property that you're going to sell potentially. How does that work?
Yes. So then that would be the other question. And before I get to that, will be, are you looking to buy or refinance something else where a bank's going to then look at this property as an asset? Because if you're going to go, well, I was going to refinance and then buy a family home, then the bank's going to go, well, let's look at your assets, and they're going to go, they're not going to look at what you bought it for. They're going to look at the income, well, one of the metrics, they'll look at the income and then come up with a new value for the property. So in some cases, it would be better to have that empty while you go through that process, because you can say it was previously rented for this, because once you've rented it, that's the new market. And the bank may take that on face value, or they may assess a rental value to go have a look. But if there hasn't been a deal for 6 months, a lot of the time they will just take the old rent. So sometimes having it vacant is better in that circumstance.
That's interesting. Who would have thought having a property vacant is a good thing? But in the big picture of financing and stuff like that, maybe I can see that. Another thing that landlords are doing rather than having it vacant is they're doing very low rents, like pigeon what do you call that? Pigeon rent,
Popcorn rent, aren't they? Or
popcorn rents.
popcorn
So
rent.
they're popcorn. They're doing popcorn rents to get it rented, and then they're ratcheting it over the next year, 2 or 3, because people's businesses aren't normally pumping from day one. So as their business pumps harder, they're paying more rent as the years roll on. So it may take 3 years for the landlord to come back to that rent. But sometimes it's worth doing the popcorn rent now, get a tenant in there, get their business running. The tenant can optimize on low rent and in a great location potentially. And then as business does better, year 2, pay more. As business gets better, year 3, pay more. So rather than being vacant and wait for the hero rent, a popcorn rent, and ratchet it up over a 3-year period.
Yeah, and I love this structure. There's 2 structures I implement and I advise the owners I deal with is where you be honest. It's a crap market. It's 25 grand a year or nothing. Now, instead of then locking it up,
and this
on
is
a
commercial.
This
is commercial we're talking about. We're going to switch to resi in a sec.
Yep. Instead of locking it up on a 5, because a lot of commercial leases are 3, 5, or 10 years when you get, say, the rent you want. So I say instead of locking it up for 5 years at 25 grand, let's just see if we can do a 1-year lease. Let's just get through this market where instead of having 2 properties in our suburb for lease, where we've got 15, let's just get a tenant in there, some money coming in. In 12 months, let's re-look at it, and the market may be better or may not be. But the thing is, if it's better, then we can renegotiate with the tenant because we've only done a 1-year lease. And if it's not, at least we've gotten income for that whole year rather than having it empty to get to another year and go, yep, still crap. Okay, it's going to be empty all year. So that's one way. And depending on the style of business, you may be able to do that. So if they're going in there doing a restaurant fit out, spending 200 grand, they're not going to want a 1-year lease because they're investing so much. But if they're just doing a retail shop and clothes racks, they may be more willing to do a shorter lease because their fit out cost isn't that much. So then you're balancing going, well, I've got 30 grand. You may have a tenant go, I'll pay you 30 grand a year, but I want a 5-year lease, compared to I will pay you 25 grand a year, but I'll do a 1-year lease. From the you may think, jump on the 30 grand, it's more money. But when you actually dig deep and go, well, actually, it's only a crap market now because they've done a few new developments and there's a lot of shops. I'd rather only lock it up for 1 year and then I can renegotiate in a year's time. That's one way. And then what Mark touched on previously is doing, let's say they are a food business and they will not entertain a 1-year lease. You do a 5-year lease. Like, look at this way. If you got 50 grand a year over 5 years, you should have had 250 grand a year over the 5-year period. Now you go to that tenant. Let's instead of having it even 50 grand each year, let's do 25 for year 1. Maybe then we go to 40 year 2, and then we go 55, 60, and 65. After the 5 years, he's still getting 250 grand, but you've just heavily weighted it towards the back. Because let's face it, Mark, a business owner doesn't mind paying rent if they're making money. Like, that's sort of the fact. So you give that business the opportunity to get settled, get a business up and running, and then
Build
pay the higher rent at the end. Yes.
That's it. How do these landlords afford to have these commercial properties vacant for so long?
It's a lot of the time they're fortunate they're buying it all cash or with only maybe a 40% debt. A lot of the time there's not much debt on it. It's not that residential mindset, Mark, or the loan criteria where you can lend up to 98% residential, 95%, 90. So you've got a lot more debt. The repayments are a lot more compared to. So you really, it's just that's a big component. A lot of people buy them with their supermarket, so there's no debt at all. So they do.
And I guess it's never their one and only. They've always got, a lot of these commercial landlords, they have between 3 or 10 properties. So for one income to dip and go down, it's easier to pallet across because they've got another 8 rents coming in. So if you're ever wondering that, What Michael said's huge, and what I'm saying is these about a landlord having these properties vacant, how they afford it, and often it's just not their only place as well. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting mindset. Residential property being vacant through COVID right now. We just had a absolute trailblazing firecracker month where we rented just over 63 properties in 1 month. We normally hit about 40, 45. It just went absolutely bananas. So the nose is coming up of the aeroplane, which is good. Vacant properties, we have experienced longer delays. So in northern beaches of Sydney, we're seeing properties vacant. We used to have them rented, maybe they were vacant for 3 to 5 days in between tenancies. Now we're finding that the vacancies are probably hitting, what do you reckon, Michael, 15 days to 20 days? Maybe 15.
Yeah, and that includes, to keep in mind, we've always been able to have a very low vacancy, especially here at Novak, because you don't start marketing it when the tenant moves out. So vacancy counts from when it's moved out and it's vacant. When you've got a proactive property manager, you're actually starting that process a month or 2 weeks earlier because you're asking the tenant, you're having that conversation. So the vacancy period is really low. I find a lot of people, they sit on their hands, keys get brought back, and they're, all right, now let's start to find a tenant. But that's when you see people blow out, even in a good market, 2 to 3 weeks, and then a bad market, 3 to 5 weeks. But I think we're probably sitting on about 2 weeks now, which is still double. Like, let's face that's double. That's a couple of weeks and owners coming up with their own mortgage.
It's interesting. So vacancies for residential have tripled from 5 days to 15 days. Rents have taken a dip for probably 10%. What do you reckon residential rents have dipped?
Yeah, it's 5 to 15%, depending on properties. And a lot of the time with owners, it's when they say, well, if I paint, will I get $10 extra? Will I carpet? Will I get $10 extra? In a good market, sometimes that applies like that thinking. But a lot of the time now, it's do these works so you get rented. You spend $5,000 and you rent it for $50 less a week, but it's to get it rented. A lot of owners struggle with that, Mark.
And the principles are different between, Michael. The principles are different between residential and commercial vacancy. They're like polar opposites, aren't they?
Tell me about it. Tell me how.
Thank you, Mike. Oh, thank you.
Enlighten me.
So with residential, you sort of it's better to take, because also you can put your rents up much more rapidly. So if you do a lower rent on a commercial, you got to honour that for 3 to 5 to 10 years potentially. Yeah. If you do a lower rent for a residential, it's really just the term of the lease at the very most. So, you can say, let's do a 6 months lease. Let's do it really low. Let's talk when we get out of the lease and just get through COVID. So a message out to landlords is, for residential, get a tenant in there, take a hit for residential. Your interest rates are half of what they were not that long ago. Please bear that in mind. And then in 6 months' time, summer's here. Be more of a hero. Don't have to be silly if you've got a good tenant, but you can make up a little bit there and equalise a little bit in the marketplace.
And Mark, I think we should mention, because I think anyone watching this is thinking to themselves, why the hell would I buy commercial property? It's empty for a year and I'm renting for 50% less. Mark, why do people buy commercial property? Let's give it a prop. What are some of the benefits? I need to do deals.
Yeah, okay.
Come on, let's save it. Let's bring it back. Why do people buy commercial?
I am really passionate about property investment. Guys and girls, you've got to realise that generally in Sydney, you will make about 15% a year. That's about the number for commercial, and for residential, it's about 15% a year. But this is what you've got to understand. The yield and the capital growth are not the same in residential or not the same in commercial, but they will combined, they will still do 15%. So commercial, you may do a 6 or 7% return on rent a year, but you may do a 6 or 7%, 8% on capital growth. Not as much capital growth because you're getting it on a yearly basis. You're getting that money coming in. With residential, you may only get a 3 or 4%, 5% return coming in, but you'll get a 10 or 11% in capital growth per year. Now, guys, if anyone's doubting those figures, these figures have been going on for about 50, 60 years now. Every single year, every single decade, that's how it rolls. And I don't think that that's going to change. That's why you buy.
What's that saying? You say, Mark, the property market's been good for 100 years and I look forward to it being good for another 100 years.
And yeah, because people, the most common question we get asked in ever of all time is, do you reckon, how's the property market? And there's like, do you really think it can keep doing what it's doing? And it's like, you know what, you're probably right. It's done really, really well the last 100 years, and it's going to do probably pretty well over the next 100 years. So at the end of it's a long game. But you don't go and spend all that money on stamp duty, 40 grand on $1 million property on stamp duty, or selling to buy and 20 grand on a real estate agent. You don't go and spend that much on transactionals to get in and out within a couple of months or a couple of years. You're in it for the long game. The long game has always proven to be about 15% return on your money every year over a 10-year period. But you've got to be in there for a 10-year period. And that's a real hard thing to do. It is.
Well, I think that's a wrap. Thanks for everyone for watching. Anything else you want to add on to that, Mark? Our episode 193, Morning Minutes.
You know what? I love going against the grain. I absolutely love it. So for someone to get into a residential rental and optimize on low rents, for someone to get into a commercial retail and optimize on super low rents and lock it in, you are a clever puppy. Equally buying, I think you don't know you're at the bottom of the market until you're
starts going up again.
Yeah, it still starts going up. I genuinely think the bottom of the market was probably about 5 weeks ago.
Yep.
So ladies and gentlemen, get busy and commit.
Beautiful. Alrighty, guys. Thank you. We'll be back tomorrow morning.
Thanks, guys. Love you. See ya.
Bye.